Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Marita Friedjon and Frank Ut de Weerd to talk about their new book, Systems Inspired Leadership. I imagine a lot of people who watch this will know who both of you are, but could you do a little introduction as to your background and what brought you together to write the book?
I think probably the most relevant piece is that I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid era. And I think the experience there and the experience of having lost my parents at a very, very young age, and then being part of the resistance against apartheid is, I think all of those factors together is part of what shaped my systemic view of things, and knowing that one person can't make a difference, that it really takes a crowd. And I think it impacted and influenced my life altogether. Combine that with the fact that South Africa, despite the atrocities and things that happened there, is a we-centered culture, different from other countries that is more I-centered. The same with Japan and some of the Asian countries, more we-centered. And so I think it's the combination of those that had me become a therapist and a family systems therapist and a consultant and then a mediator and 1,200 other things. It was when I got to coaching that the penny dropped and brought all of it together, because coaching really is focused not on fixing the past as much as it is focused on creating from a future informed by the past. So I think my coach training experience and faculty experience with CTI contributed hugely to this. And then close to 20 years of the journey with us in organization and relationship systems coaching, where so much of the theories and applications were crafted and experiences gained globally, because we train in 14 to 18 different countries. And so that kept bringing the global influence and the diversity pieces. And I think that's what dreamt us into the seat that I'm occupying today. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, I'm born in the Netherlands, so I'm also living there right now. I work with leaders and leadership teams in particular. I really want to help them to be more human-centered and also more systems-inspired. I really feel if you work with leaders and their teams, this has such a multiplier impact. So that's what I love to do. I'm a psychologist of background. I worked for a long time in Shell as a HR manager. That gave me great opportunities to also work abroad. I lived in Gabon in Africa, in Malaysia, also in Belgium quite a couple of years, and in the UK, and many, many roles in the Netherlands. And as part of that, I also have been involved with organization relationship system coaching. I've been trained by Marita and myself. You may not remember that, Marita. It was back in 2010, something like that. Yeah. And I really felt this is coming home for me. The values that are there are really close to my heart. The complexity of the material, the depth of it, the practicality, this whole combination, this package I love. And since 7 years, I left Shell and do this now on my own as a consultant, together with many, many other people. I'm also part of the faculty. I'm really grateful for that. And that also, I think, it brings this work together and this book together very naturally.
So Marita and Frank, what is systems inspired leadership?
It's really that you as a leader, you really work with the system. You build with the system. You really tap the answers there, knowing it's there. And there's some techniques to know where the system wants to go if you know how to do it. So that's the essence of systems inspired leadership.
And I think it also ties into that principle of relationship systems intelligence, or RSI as we talk about it, that leadership is a role that belongs to the system. We have the outer roles at the moment here as the authors of the book being interviewed, but the leadership for this call is actually shared between the two of us and you.
It's so important you say that, because indeed it is, we talk about leaders, we address leaders, but it's actually about leadership. We talk about systems inspired leadership, and it's really trusting that the collective, the collaboration between people is there, and that also the role of the leader is much more fluid. Sometimes you follow, sometimes you take the lead, It's like you said, Marita, with the three of us as well. And you need that in a context that is very complex. So if everything changes and you don't have all the data anymore, you can't rely on simply one person or a small group of person knowing what it looks like and then saying and telling what to do. It doesn't work anymore in the 21st century.
Are you meaning to say that you can change leaders depending on the situation, or do you mean that the system informs the leader in which direction to take, or do you mean both?
I think that the outer role of leader remains. The buck stops somewhere, decisions need to be made, but those inner roles of wisdom, new information, all of those bring information to the outer role that is leader. And that is the information from which the leader can then act. So that we see a lot of the dominant top-down leadership globally at the moment in politics and in different environments. And we can see how that creates division, that it is us against them or something like that. There's no authoritarian place. All the diversity issues that we have is somewhere around that. So yeah, it belongs to the system. There's an Aboriginal tribe that actually in the mornings sit around the campfire and they are asking the children to share their dreams, because I believe that children have not been grown or educated in a way to not have clean access to nature and to information. So in those roles, the children, even though they are children, actually hold the leadership role and are pulled into it. Share your dreams so that we can learn from it. That's always been a very powerful metaphor for me.
So how did you start to develop the concept for systems-inspired leadership, the book itself?
I think that my perspective is that this was also emerging. So emergence is an important concept we have. It's one of our relationship systems intelligence principles. So something is really coming to the surface. So as you know, Marita, together with Faith Fuller, she created the ORS curriculum, very popular, meant for coaches. And then all of a sudden, all kind of leaders coming up, joining the course and saying, wow, but we address them as coaches, not as leaders. And I'm also, I had really a corporate background. I'm now much more working as a leadership consultant. So I saw that, and I saw that it is so self-evident that we try to create something specific for the leadership group.
I think you are correct in talking about emergence. I think for me as thought leader, creatrix of curriculum and data together with Faith Fuller, I think that from the organization and relationship systems coaching perspective that we first started our work, that really was about operationalizing different modern systems thinking models. And as we started working with that, there was the emergence from that led us to relationship systems intelligence that Dr. Anna Rod and myself wrote about. And from that, there was just the combination of research and emergence of models and things in the world that since 2016, a lot of my speaking engagement and work with teams have been around what is RSI and what is the work that we train in the coaching industry. How does that translate into leadership? And I think that that's where the whole process started for me. So when Frank approached to ask about co-authoring a book, it was a match made in heaven.
Yeah,
because
it came together in a way. Yeah.
Yes, I like creating the thinking and being informed by the universe and all its bits and pieces. And sometimes I need somebody to help with the logistical pieces and getting it out.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for leaders wanting to inspire change, and how did this challenge manifest in your relationship?
If you say inspire change, it looks as if change is not around. The reality is change is always there. But probably what is meant, how do you ensure, how do you arrange, how do you ensure that people are following you, that they choose to change the direction you want? I think the paradox there is, as a leader, first of all, to be open, to be influenced in the direction you want. So that's quite a big attitude, very different. We call that the systems inspired rule. So everyone is right partially. Are you open for that? And the paradox is really to pay a lot of attention to the so-called resistors. Really hear their view, see what they value, actually what they want to keep. Because change is never 100% change. You always want to leave something there. And the paradox there is, and that you will hear that more and more. So in order to go a bit slower, maybe initially, that goes faster afterwards.
I think that because we, in writing the book, interviewed 30 plus people that have leaders that have done our work and the training and applying it actively in their leadership role. What became very apparent is the fatigue that there is for leaders from the expectation of the old top-down attitude that modern corporate grew up in, that they have to come up with the answers. And when we could begin to introduce the possibility that you may have a thought, but the answers and how it manifests actually is a systemic event. It can never be yours alone. Once leaders begin to go there, they report a sense of relief and less fatigue because they don't carry it alone anymore. From a certain perspective, one of the biggest challenges I think that leaders expect when attempting this is that so much of the corporate world grew up and were educated in that the leader should have the answer. So there often we experience a resistance on the team when they are invited, elevated to share in the decision because they suddenly know it's your job. So for some leaders, it's a bigger challenge than for others, and it's a systemic event. So you can only go one step at a time in the beginning of this evolution. But it is an evolution that's trying to happen.
Yeah, we talk about navigating change. That's much more how we look at it. So how can we navigate that together intelligently, rather than imposing?
And I want to pick up again on what you said, Frank, earlier about the marginalized voices. If we look at what's happening and what are the biggest cultural and systemic challenges for us in the world at the moment, it is around inclusion and diversity and equity. It's a very steep learning curve for those of us that have rank and privilege, whether it is gender, whether it is race, and there's a massive learning curve that is about the leadership that's emerging from those marginalized voices. And the biggest challenge is that, I'm going to use the phrase that is often used, that in the work with those leaders who bring those marginalized, they are leaders, every single one of them, those marginalized voices, there actually isn't room in those conversations for white fragility, or whatever fragility it is that your rank stems from. There needs to be a sitting down in the fire and hear from those that are perceived to be very different from you, because that is our evolution. And that's systems inspired.
Yeah, and that can be uncomfortable.
But can you see how the moment the book is published, it's already outdated? Because we don't write too much about the pieces that I just spoke to. And those are the things that are driving change at the moment in our world.
Is there going to be a systems inspired leadership part 2?
There always is in these things. It never stops.
So I think if you read our acknowledgement, there we also will say, we thank all the giants, the shoulders we stand on, first of all. So we also part of an emergence, and we hope people will take it on as well. So it's not so much for us, or it will evolve. And this is our contribution. And there may be a 2.0 version or a 3.0, but maybe it is really a further catalyst for a truly new, modern way of leading, which is so needed in this world.
I love what you're saying, Frank, because the reality is, I noticed how we immediately went to, will we produce a second edition? Chances are, probably, God willing, and the creek not rising and more COVID or whatever shows up, the systemic dream is that these are models that are evolving. Yeah. And that others that at the moment are sitting next to us or have been trained or will come up and will continue to evolve this. So there too, it's not just residing in the 2 co-authors that you are talking with at the moment. It is a systemic event that will be picked up if that is what is trying to emerge.
Yeah, and I think you also asked, so how did it show up in our relationship? I think for me, that's always what you held, Marita. So if you want to go fast, go alone, yeah? And if you want to go together, it takes a bit longer. I'm not having the phrase right now.
If
So,
you're going to go fast, go alone. If you want to go
yeah,
far, go together.
that's it.
It's the
Yeah,
Ubuntu saying, yes.
yeah. And I think that's very true for our relationship as well. In particular, maybe so say I would like to have it accelerated at times a bit more, but it was not possible. And trusting that it's good and that it's coming out, and then here we are. The book is there, and I think we put in so much love and effort, and I think it's just the best we could give to the world right now. And yeah, that's our gift.
And I think that what Frank is so skillfully saying is that in the authoring of the book, we had to walk the talk of systems inspired. Because in some consensus reality terms, I am the older, I am the founder of the company, I am the co-creator of something. Frank came after me, but there are other strengths and power that he brings from his corporate world. And he is part of our faculty. So it's that piece in terms of how the world wants to see us and how we are in those roles being dreamt up, and then the putting down of those roles and realizing that it actually is the relationship between us that is creating the book with the help of all faculty and partners and alumni and people that came before and had the difficult conversations and asked the difficult questions. So did we have the good fight from time to time? Absolutely. That's normal. Without that, I would be worried about it. So that's the walking the talk of it.
What did you both learn whilst writing this book?
A lot is, of course, on the content. So by writing it down, things become much more explicit. And then also, if I start a dialogue with Marita, so the insights deepen. But for me, the merit is much more in the process. So the trust that something beautiful comes out. You also referring already, Marita, to the 30 plus people we interviewed. Yeah, so very experienced relationship system leaders. So what did they do? And these interviews were so lovely. I learned so much about it, but the whole book, all the fingerprints are there of them, but maybe the names are not on the book as such. And also, if we then had a kind of challenge, so whether it's the acronym for the competency model, we knew there should be an acronym. So, but what will it be, or how to get the book published? Yeah, so to find our own book coach, all these things. If you put it out there, the answer will come. And that's very much in line with the philosophy, essence of systems-inspired leadership.
For me, the biggest learning was becoming consciously aware of the reality of that which we are writing about. It wasn't until we were in the process of writing it that I could begin to see the eldership and the contribution that emerged. And we were just the dream maker's apprentice, like Ani Mandel would say, and actually writing it. But it never was just me or just Frank or just the two of us, ever. So how to then from that place put acknowledgements in the book is virtually impossible.
The word interdependence is coming through loud and clear. So we are not independent parts working isolated. We are so connected. Not only as co-authors, but just you see all the connections are there worldwide. And isn't it that if you really go down, you are connected to, 3 steps from everyone in the world? If you, or within 6, I don't know precisely the mathematics, but it's really close. We are one in the end.
Back to the research, can you tell me a little bit more about how you went about the research for the book and why you decided to do it the way that you did? So you've touched on that a little bit already.
The big foundation is, of course, being informed by the ORSC material. And the relationship system intelligence, all the work that Marita and Faith did. So that's the whole basis. And then we wanted to really get a sense of how it works out in the real life by having these interviews with 30 people. So that's the second data point. In addition, based on everything we do, we also have a good look at literature and developments. We did a lot on things around systems-inspired safety, looking at the work of Edmondson, for example. Yeah, so all these things come together.
The interviews were hugely helpful. It also helped shape, because when we started our journey together, Frank and myself, I already had some competencies that were tested out in training rooms and with teams that I've worked with. So when we did the interviews, we already had some roughly drafted model. The interviews actually and the actual experiences of leaders in the field help shape and fine-tune those competencies.
One of the first chapters in the book was how should this book be used? So could you explain for people interested in the book how you intended for this book to be used?
A big target audience is leaders, the people in the outer role of leader, who have leader in their job title. And we have not exclusively made it for people in the top jobs, although it's well known that if you influence those people, that will have an easier change effect in the organization, but also for a middle manager or a type of middle manager who is in all these forces. In the experiences I had as an HR manager, I have worked with so many of those. So I had always in my mind this group of people, how could we help them? Having said that, systems-inspired leadership is very well suited for, let's say, self-organizing organizations, or more the agile organizations. So where leadership already is much more fluid and leadership is shared. So it's also very suitable for them. And that's one big category, so leaders. And then the second one is, it is for change makers. So coaches, for example, if you're coaching leaders, so this thinking, this model can really help you a lot, but also for HR managers, for OD specialists. So everyone in that area. And we have many examples of people already saying, yes, it's great material, we can use it, and we know it works, yeah, because nothing is invented. It's all based on proof that the material works. And the last category, I would say, is very much about employees. If we say leadership is a role of the system, so it's all of us. It's all of us in the capacity of leader, and not so much leading, yes, all follow me, but contributing to something better, to create something better.
When I think at the moment of where and how these things can be useful, the model that we're talking about, the competencies that go together with the model, if I just think of recent experiences that I've had with friends and family in hospital situations with medical teams, and we've done training with several large hospital organizations. But when you begin to look there, the hospital teams that do best are the ones that are actually very systems inspired. They pay attention not only to the diagnosis, but to the emotional experience and validity of questions and actions that come from the patient itself. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about using this in schools, where children can be systems inspired leaders, where they can inform the teacher of what's needed. So I can give 100 examples of where on this street, the same principles, the same competencies that we hold as leadership is manifested by people that are not sitting in a leadership role. It's manifested by the person that is checking people out in a supermarket. I have watched some of those people behave and act with customers that were in trouble in a way that is a model for leaders. Yeah. So on some level, I absolutely want for leaders to be doing this and to become co-evolvers of a model like this. But I want to put attention to the fact that these principles, these competencies live on the street. Leadership is an everyday task for everybody if they can access it in these kinds of ways.
In terms of the book, the focus is very much on the doing, and of course doing being, yeah, so you can say, is that really a distinction? But the focus is on doing, because we know that will appeal most to most people. So how to do it, and that will change the being. And then we think that will be an iterative process. So that's also a bias. If you get access to the material, we will give you some tips how to do it. At least you can start and act your way in a new way of being.
What would your advice be for young leaders wanting to adopt this mindset into their approach to leadership? I see how this book, it could be so useful across so many industries for young leaders, really bringing a shift in leadership style in the future.
I think that the younger generation of leaders are actually better equipped. There's a different thinking mindset that gives me hope in many different ways. And one of the things that we tried to do was to remain as practical as possible, because there are people that already have the mindset that we are coming from, or that the modern systems thinking is coming from. And just with a slight tweak, something shows up that already is embodied in them. So I think it's not going to be a challenge. It's going to be an easier approach than for people that have been established in this kind of culture for 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I echo that. So I think the whole sense of democratization, what we call the systems inspired rule. So every voice counts. That is very prominent, and that's also very present within the younger generations, at least. But also, maybe not so explicitly, but if you look through the book and Systems Inspired Leaders, it's very purpose driven. So we talk about the concept of a third entity. A third entity is basically the whole. Like Marita and myself, we're the two entities, but it's the relationship that created the book. This relationship is actually also containing a purpose. And if you are able, that's the invitation we have for people to listen to what that third entity wants. Yeah, if you're really getting sensitive to that. So how can I contribute? What's my calling? Without giving yourself away, on the contrary, to be really authentic, because what's your deepest voice? But your deepest voice, we also say, what's your calling? Your calling is coming from the outside. It's coming from something bigger, a bigger whole. So for me, the whole purpose-driven side of it is so prominent in the thinking, and I'm sure that will appeal so much to the new wave of leaders.
ORSC is quite relationship focused, but then you spoke about an importance to have that balance between being task focused and relationship focused. Are they polarized ways of working, or can you learn to be a leader and do both?
There's so much to say about this. A lovely question. I think if you look from the traditional perspective, leaders' organizations are very task-driven, so outcome-oriented. And people were basically seen as instruments, cogs in a machine. And that may have worked in the 20th century, but it's not working in a complex environment anymore. And that's also what we see. There's also, ORSC was such a success all the time. So the people knew that focus on relationship is really the way to create results. And initially that's counterintuitive, maybe, to really focus on people. So you focus not on the deliverables, but you focus on people will give the deliverables. That's for many older leaders quite a shift in mindset. We saw many leaders that we interviewed, quite some leaders, who found it difficult to make their own point. They are too much in service of other people. But it's important also to say, no, this is what we need, and this is what I need. So at times it can be polarized, but that you see that the research is also very powerful about it. And we make a quote around that. So if you combine it, your leadership, at least also your perception goes up in spades.
Thanks a lot, Marita and Frank, for joining me. This has been really insightful. And where can people get the book?
You can find it on Amazon. So type in Amazon. It may be wise to check out some more sites of Amazon to find out where it's cheapest for you, also in relation to shipping costs. So for people in the UK, go to amazon.co.uk. There you can find it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.